Imagine dawn light creeping across your bedroom floor when fists hammer the door. Neighbors scream that your spirit rode their rooftops at midnight, that phantom teeth gnawed their flesh. You stagger outside, still barefoot, dragged to a wooden meeting house where children point and shriek, "She's biting me now." 9 hours later, a judge signs your death warrant because somebody sneezed at breakfast and called it witchcraft. That was Salem, Massachusetts, 1692, a town where rumor wrote the law and 19 ordinary people ended life at the end of a rope. Tonight, we reopen the parchment indictments, the diary pages, and dying confessions to uncover how mass hysteria flips a community upside down, and why the same blueprint still fits our digital world. Salem Village lay 12 miles north of Boston, a patchwork of rough timber cottages pressed against dark pine forest and frozen marsh. January winds sliced through the shingles, snow piled against doorposts, wolves howled at the tree line. 200 Puritan souls survived on rye bread, salted cod, and weekly scripture. Their creed, imported from England, preached that Satan walked the earth looking for weak minds to corrupt. Any failed harvest, sick calf, or dying child could be read as proof he had arrived. Politically, the colony reeled. The Glorious Revolution in London had toppled King James II. Massachusetts's charter was abruptly revoked, taxes were in limbo, and frontier militias traded musket shots with Wabanaki war parties along the Maine border. Fear was ambient, like the frost. Inside Reverend Samuel Parris's parsonage, the air was different still, thick with incense and suspicion. Parris, once a failed Barbados merchant, had brought back a Caribbean servant named Tituba. She cooked, cared for the Reverend's 9-year-old daughter Betty and his 11-year-old niece Abigail Williams, and sometimes entertained them with stories of island folklore and crystal-gazing eggs dropped in a glass of water. It was harmless diversion, until winter boredom met Puritan guilt. On a moonless night in mid-January, Betty collapsed into violent spasms. Abigail clawed at invisible insects. Witnesses said the girls contorted beyond the frame of nature, barking like dogs and crawling beneath furniture. Dr. William Griggs, summoned from 2 villages away, examined them by candlelight and could not explain the fits. Lacking a natural cure, he offered a supernatural cause. The evil hand is upon them. In a community baptized in demonology, that sentence was a match to tinder. Salem Village already festered with rivalries. The wealthy Porters traded fur with Boston merchants and favored a liberal town charter. The conservative Putnams preferred isolation and tighter church discipline. Families argued over grazing rights, mill fees, and whether the new meeting house should be built on Porter land or Putnam pasture. When the minister's household cried witch, both factions saw a chance either to settle grudges or redirect blame. Worse, food stores were low. The summer drought had shriveled corn, a late blight blackened rye. Cows aborted calves. Every misfortune begged a scapegoat. Puritan sermons warned that witchcraft spread like infection. To spare the body, you amputated the limb. All that was required was an accusation, and those often fell on society's outsiders: the enslaved, the beggar, the non-churchgoer, the woman who spoke her mind. And so, under dim lanterns and the hiss of winter wind, the stage was set. All it needed was a name. Within days, Betty Parris and Abigail Williams were joined by 11-year-old Ann Putnam, Jr. She convulsed during Sunday sermons, screaming that a tall specter in black pinched her skin. Mercy Lewis, an orphaned servant who had survived a Wabanaki raid in Maine, fell to the floor as if shot. Adults watched, powerless and terrified of being next. The afflicted girls named the figure tormenting them Tituba. Tituba was easy prey: foreign accent, dark skin, slave status. Beside her, the girls named Sarah Good, a homeless mother who begged door to door, and Sarah Osborne, an elderly widow bedridden with illness who seldom attended church. On 29th February 1692, magistrates John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin issued arrest warrants. 1st March. The village meeting house was converted to a court. Spectators huddled against walls. Icy draughts blew beneath doors. Magistrate Hathorne opened. Sarah. Good, what evil spirit have you familiarity with? Good replied, none. A chorus of girls shrieked and collapsed. Hathorne interpreted every cry as proof. Good insisted, I am more likely to be bewitched than to be a witch. She was led away in chains. Tituba's examination followed. Perhaps to save her own life, or coached by the magistrates, she confessed, weaving an extraordinary tale. A man, all black, forced her to sign the devil's book with blood. She described yellow birds that sucked victims' flesh, wolfish beasts, and a spectral army riding sticks through the sky. The court accepted her every word. A confession validated the judges and inflamed the crowd. Worse, Tituba said she saw other names in the book, yet unread. Suspicion metastasized overnight. Massachusetts Governor Sir William Phips, fresh from wars against the French in Acadia, returned to find jails overflowing. To clear the docket, he created a special tribunal, the Court of Oyer and Terminer, to hear and determine. 7 judges, all landowning men, none trained lawyers. At their head, William Stoughton, an iron-willed zealot who believed witches were Satan's marines. Crucially, the tribunal allowed spectral evidence. If the afflicted claimed they saw your spirit stab them in a dream, that vision alone could condemn you. English common law required tangible proof. Stoughton did not. Cotton Mather, Boston's rising theologian, urged caution but still argued witches must be rooted out as vipers of the Commonwealth. His father, Increase Mather, more skeptical, warned, "It were better that 10 suspected witches should escape than one innocent person be condemned." Few listened. 10 June, Bridget Bishop, an outspoken tavern owner who wore bright red and played shuffleboard on the Sabbath, became the first casualty. At Gallows Hill, a cart halted beneath a simple wooden frame. Bishop prayed her innocence. The noose dropped. Silence fell. The crowd dispersed, but the machine of accusation kept grinding. June 29th, Sarah Good, Sarah Wilds, Elizabeth Howe, Susanna Martin, and Rebecca Nurse were tried. Nurse, a 71-year-old matriarch beloved for her piety, nearly won acquittal. But the girl's renewed screaming swayed the jury. She was hanged on the 19th of July, her final words asking God to forgive her accusers. Citizens began to wonder, if Rebecca Nurse could be a witch, who was safe? By August, the prison in Boston charged inmates 2 shillings a day for their own shackles and straw bedding. Infants shivered beside their mothers. Bread rations ran thin. Lice thrived. Yet warrants kept coming, driven sometimes by spite, sometimes by greed. If a landowner died convicted, his property escaped to the colony. Jealous neighbors eyed the acres. Giles Corey, a muscular farmer of 81, had once testified against a neighbor for theft. That neighbor's wife now cried witchcraft. Corey, knowing a plea of guilty or not guilty would lead to confiscation of his estate, chose a rare tactic. He stood mute. Under English law, the court could then apply peine forte et dure, pressing by heavy stones, until the accused entered a plea. On 19 September, sheriffs stripped Corey naked, laid him in a pit, placed a board on his chest, and added stones. Witness Thomas Hutchinson wrote, his tongue lolled from his mouth. Each time he was asked to speak, Corey gasped, "More weight." After 2 days, his ribs cracked, blood frothed at his lips. He died, but his farm passed legally to his heirs, not the court. Even in death, he outwitted them. The executioners hoped the spectacle would end resistance. Instead, it cracked the illusion of righteousness. If judges could crush an octogenarian patriot, perhaps the devil wore a powdered wig on the bench. The autumn leaves turned crimson. So did public opinion. When the girls accused Rebecca Nurse's sister, Mary Easty, 36 neighbors signed a petition calling her a woman of blameless life. The judges hanged her anyway. Talk of innocence traveled fast to Boston printers, where pamphlets mocked the reliance on childish visions. But the fatal blow came mid-October when rumors reached Governor Phipps's mansion. Lady Mary Phipps, his own wife, was whispered to appear in devilish company. If spectral evidence could touch the governor's household, the system had devoured itself. Phipps slammed the brakes. On 29th October, he dissolved the Court of Oyer and Terminer. A new superior court convened in January 1693, this time banning spectral evidence. Result: of 52 indictments, only 3 convictions, quickly reprieved by the governor. One defendant, who had spent 9 months in irons, emerged so malnourished her weight had halved. Another mother found her infant had died in prison. The hangman's ladder was taken apart, the noose frayed in rain. Public confessions followed. Judge Samuel Sewall stood in Boston's South Church on the 14th of January, 1697, and read a statement. "As I desire to take the blame and shame of it, I humbly beg pardon." Congregation members wept, some turned away. Sewall spent every January 14th thereafter, fasting in penitence. The afflicted girls. Many disappeared from records. Ann Putnam, Jr., at age 26, apologized. "It was a great delusion of Satan that deceived me." Others never recanted. The damage, however, was irreparable. 25 dead, 19 hanged, 5 perished in jail, 1 pressed to death, and more than 100 lives ruined by incarceration, fees, and stigma. In 1711, the Massachusetts legislature passed a bill reversing the attainder for some victims and granting £600 in restitution, approximately £12 per family, which was far from the value of the lost farms. Not until 1957 did the Commonwealth exonerate the final 6 names. The words witch and felon were legally erased, but only posthumously. Yet Salem's shadow darkened Enlightenment. When American revolutionaries drafted their Constitution, they remembered Stoughton's tribunal. The Fifth and Sixth Amendments, encompassing due process, the right to counsel and trial by an impartial jury, are, in part, safeguards against another Oyer and Terminer. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes later cited Salem while limiting unreliable testimony. Modern courts reject dreams, visions, and lie detector tests, partly because Puritan judges trusted spectral evidence. Thus, the deaths at Gallows Hill etched caution into the DNA of American law. Literature carried the flame. Nathaniel Hawthorne, descendant of Judge Hathorne, added the W to his surname out of shame and wrote The Scarlet Letter, exploring inherited guilt. In 1953, Arthur Miller penned The Crucible, dressing McCarthy-era blacklists in Puritan garb to show hysteria's vintage. Tourism sprouted. The Witch House, once Corwin's home, charges $9.50 a ticket. Every October, 500,000 visitors flood Salem's Essex Street, buying pentagram T-shirts and pumpkin lattes where gallows once cast shadows. Commerce packaged tragedy, but the moral, how fear weaponizes rumor, remains intact for those who care to read the plaques between souvenir stalls. Why did so many people hallucinate bites and claws? Historians duel over 3 main theories. 1. Ergot poisoning. LSD's molecular ancestor grows on damp rye. In 1976, biologist Linda Caporal noted Salem's rye harvest matched the climate for ergot. Convulsions, crawling sensations, and vivid dreams fit the symptoms. Critics counter that ergot hits whole communities, yet adult men who ate the same bread remained fine. Property and power, the Putnams filed the majority of complaints. Their rivals, the Porters, were wealthy merchants. Each accusation slowed land sales, letting Putnams buy cheap. Deposition records show Thomas Putnam coached his daughter to name targets whose property he coveted. But greed alone cannot fake teenage seizures. Mass psychogenic illness. Modern psychologists map the outbreak onto conversion disorder, where stress manifests as physical symptoms. Frontier warfare, disease, and political chaos, all stressors. Add a rigid faith and hormonal adolescence, stir with suggestion, and bodies may convulse sincerely. Social media today shows similar contagion. Rumors of poisoned Halloween candy, QAnon child trafficking rings, or panics about 5G towers. The Salem algorithm ran on sermon, gossip, and colonial mail. Our version runs at fiber optic speed. Perhaps no single key fits every lock. The lesson is not what caused the panic, but how quickly communities forget to ask for evidence once fear sharpens the pitchforks. We've watched rumor tighten a noose in 1692. Could a hashtag do the same tomorrow? Type your verdict below. The most thought-provoking comment appears in next week's episode on the Black Death. For deeper dives, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and binge the Dark History playlist floating on your screen. Until then, question every story you share before it puts someone else on trial.